In this lesson, we are going to look at the guitar solo from the May 18th, 1972 recording of Ramble on Rose by the Grateful Dead. For every jam analysis video, there is a point. There is a reason that I'm teaching that specific solo. You might have seen with the Evolve Fish solo that was just recently posted, there was an emphasis there on dynamics. For this lesson, we are going to focus on triads. That's how these started. These jam analysis lessons started out as these pretty detailed approaches to understanding why each and every note in a solo fits and works with the chords. I'm going to return to that now with this. For the most part, I like to think that you can learn entire phrases and pick out just certain pieces of it and let that be the analysis of a solo. But for something like this, where the chord changes are plentiful, I think that this is just a really, really good example and study into how to solo using triads and chord tones. So the link to the solo is attached in the lesson materials below this video. So if you go check that out, you click on the link, it'll bring you to the tabs, but more importantly, the video. Just watch that. Just listen to it all the way through, because then you can come back and look at this line by line analysis of it. Like I said, there are a lot of chord changes in this song. These are all reflected, for the most part, all reflected with the soloing and the notes that Jerry played in the solo. So first up, obviously most importantly, you want to understand what key we're in and what the chords are. The chords are listed with each of these lines, so it'll be very easy to see if there's a D chord being played here, this is why this note sounds good. And I'll explain all of that. As a general key for this song, we're thinking D major, right? So for the first line, this is what it sounds like. If we're thinking about D major and he's playing over a D chord, you should be able to see that he's playing in this box, right? That belongs to this E shape of the D major chord. Right? And he's starting with a little pre-bend right there. Now for the next line. Now, we've got something a little bit more interesting. We're moving to that E7 chord. And what we're seeing him do is bend up this note's a D, but he's bending it up to an E, right? Which is a crucial part of that chord. And then he ends with this little chromatic thing. Now, right now, there's not much really going on regarding the chord. Yeah, he's using chromatics to move from the D to the E, and they're still over the E7 chord, so that kind of makes sense. But it resolves itself in the next line, right here. So when he bends up this 17th fret of the B string, he's targeting this note. This note comes from that F sharp minor triad. Right? Now, a quick pause. If those triads don't make sense, and if this recall is not as quick for you, I really, really recommend going to any of those major triad lessons and or those minor triad lessons. That will give you a good idea of where I'm pulling these triads from and what they look like in the context of this scale. So, moving forward, we got this. Now, this 18th fret, bending up, I can't really relate that to a G chord. It's just a cool blues lick, right? Here's a D. So we're centering ourselves in the C shape of the D scale, right? It's hitting the root over that D chord. Now moving to the next line. Now, this line is important, and it's pretty apparent what's going on here with that A chord specifically. So again, this is what the line sounds like. So a majority of what's being played here is centered around this A major triad, or this portion of like an A major pentatonic scale. Right? So if you remember that, this triad comes from the C shape of the A major pentatonic scale. He's just playing directly down this. Right? So that's a cool point to pause at. If you're playing over any given chord for an extended period of time, you can actually go in and play off of that triad and add in some of those pentatonic notes for that scale specifically. For the next line, so this part's really cool. There's a pattern of ideas that he's establishing where he's sliding into a note and pausing on a chord tone. So here, it's the 5 of D. It's the 1 of D. There's the 3 of D. And then he's ending it with a little bend, a half bend on the 15th fret of the high E string. When he does that, the note that he's targeting is the 16th fret of the E string. Now, that 16th fret is the third note in this E7 triad, which is the next chord. So here he's thinking ahead. He's playing the note before the chord comes in, so it creates some tension, and then when the chord is being played in the next measure, it kind of resolves on its own. This is the next line. So he's still playing this 15th fret. And then these two notes, here's an E, and there's an F sharp. They're both in the key of E. They both kind of agree with that E7 triad. Right? So in this, he's specifically targeting that E. Now at the end, he's moving down and he's kind of moving back into the key of D. So here's the next line. So in this line, actually, I don't think that he's doing all that much with following the chords. He is initially bending up this 12th fret to the 14th fret, which is an F sharp. So it kind of follows that F sharp minor chord. But the rest of it, it's all just in D. There's a G chord being played. There's an A chord being played. But this is an instance of maybe not needing to follow the chords in such a detailed manner. Here's the last line. So, the last line, it's a G and an A. This, he's kind of thinking of, again, the C-shaped position of the A. And this bend on the 12th fret of the B string is going up to the 14th fret, which is the third note in A. And then it ends on the 5th degree in the key of A. I just talked a lot about random notes and their relationship to the chords that are being played and triad shapes and scale shapes and whatnot. A bunch of theory stuff that honestly, a few years ago, I would not have been interested in at all. But what I can say from my experience over the last few years, learning this and teaching this material, is it is so important to be able to analyze a solo like this, because when you then move to something else that you want to solo over and it's got a complex chord progression, you can actually look at it and say, okay, this is the key that I'm playing in. These are the chords. If I want to be able to sound like I'm really following the progression, now I know where all the triads are. I've practiced getting to them quickly and identifying what might sound good in the context of a progression that has many chord changes like this. So for the practice routine, I just want you to learn the solo, note for note, line by line. And as you're going through, I think it would be helpful if you referred back to this video and took note of some of the things that I'm saying about which notes relate to which triads or which chord shapes, just so that you can sort of get that analytical approach to it going. The next step is then to move to the backing track that I've provided. That backing track is a whole step down from this solo. So everything is 2 frets lower. Try to play the solo over that in its entirety, right? So you're just transposing it down a whole step. And then you can mess around with that backing track however much you want. If you want to just continue practicing the solo note for note, but in that new key, go for it. If you want to practice your own ways of connecting the triads and moving between different scale shapes and chord shapes, do that. If you want to complete the extra credit, that part of this lesson is to go to that backing track, write a 60-second solo. So actually like compose the solo that focuses on the same sort of ideas here. So using triads and chord shapes and scale shapes to move around in this solo, both melodically, but also with technique and with an understanding of how everything connects. So good luck with this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.